Hello. We often describe astrology as a symbolic language because many things in astrology do not seem to be grounded in the physical world. So, for example, our tropical zodiac, it's not based on the stars. And then we have ideas like secondary progressions, where we say a day equals a year. Well, a day does not equal a year equals 365 and a quarter days, but symbolically and mythically, the natural cycle of a day seems similar to the natural cycle of a year. And in astrology, we can make these kind of symbolic associations, and we use them. And so astrology seems like a language of symbols, similar to how dreams work, or how, it's one idea of how dreams work. And there are other techniques like solar arc directions, which seem even more symbolic and less related to the physical world. So often we kind of assume astrology is a symbolic language. However, there's been some recent discoveries in physics and other areas that suggest that these wild symbolic ideas of astrology are perhaps not just in a symbolic world. So, what I'm going to show you here is that maybe, as I have this question at the bottom of the slide, is it really true that these relationships are just symbolic? So what I'm going to do is show you the idea of secondary progressions real quickly. I think most of you are familiar with it. And then we'll talk about how secondary progressions could easily be understood as being fractal primarily, and solar arc directions as well. This is very interesting because the three predictive methods that are very common in modern Western astrology are transits, secondary progressions, and solar arc directions. And we have been thinking, many of us in astrology, that transits are, they're grounded in the physical world. It's where the planets are today. And then we think of secondary progressions and solar arc directions as symbolic. Well, maybe we could substitute the word fractal instead of symbolic. And I'm going to show you why I think that's a reasonable thing to do. So first, a quick review of what secondary progressions are. I've got the chart here of Justin Timberlake, this singer. He was born on January 31st, 1981. And the idea is that when he is 30 years old, for example, whatever happened on his 30th day, he's only a month old, a baby who's a month old, what happens on his 30th day is lived out in his 30th year of life. And one way to describe this is it's like an internal clock. When you look at a clock, an old-fashioned clock, most of us now only see digital clocks, but an old-fashioned clock with the little hands that go around, every time the hour hand goes around, the minute hand goes around 60 times. And every time the minute hand goes around, the second hand goes around 60 times. So you have one hand going around 60 times faster than another. It's the same exact idea. It's as if we have an internal clock that's going 365 times slower than the actual real clock that we live in. So we have an internal clock that moves one day for each year that we live. So if I go to an ephemeris for the day that Justin Timberlake was born, he was born on January 31st, 1981, I will see the positions of his planets. So his sun is at 12 degrees Aquarius. So let's go to the ephemeris. I'm in the Sirius 2.0 software. And if I click on ephemeris and then planets text ephemeris, it brings up the ephemeris. Now let me change it to the year he was born, 1981. So I'll type 1981 and press enter. And I want to go to, let me slide this down so I can see there is birth information, January 31st. So I'll change this to January. I'll just type 01 for the month, hit enter. And if we go to the bottom of the month, if I scroll down, January 31st, there's the sun. This is the column for the sun at 11 Aquarius 02 and the moon at 12 Sagittarius 03. Let me slide this over. And his sun is actually a little bit later, almost a whole degree later, 12 Aquarius 04. Moon is 24 degrees Sagittarius, not 12. Why is that? Because he wasn't born at the beginning of the day. He was born towards the end of the day at 6:30 p.m. And in fact, if I look at this information in the lower right corner, it's telling me that the universal time, also known as GMT or Greenwich Mean Time, is 0 hours 30 minutes. He was born at 6:30 p.m. in the central time zone in the United States, so he's actually born at 0 hours 30 minutes universal time on the next day. So I'm going to go back to the ephemeris, click this green arrow to jump to February, and I'm going to change the time to 0 hours 30 minutes. So 0 hours 30 minutes, press enter, and by default this is set up to be in universal time, also known as GMT. In fact, it says it right there, 0 hours 30 minutes GMT. And now when I look at the positions, they are exactly the same. So his sun, 12 Aquarius 04 in the chart wheel, there it is, sun 12 Aquarius 04. There's the moon, 24 Sagittarius 42, 24 Sagittarius 42. So the ephemeris, of course, is showing the positions of the planets. And if you go in the ephemeris and set the time to the time the person was born, of course, you're going to have the planet positions. So what we're saying is that if we add 7 days to his birthday, so 7 years after he's born, the sun would be at 19 Aquarius 10, the moon is at 29 Pisces 41. I'll highlight this line. These are the progressed positions for when he is that old, and so on. So when he reaches this age, these are the positions. So you can look in the ephemeris and you can see what the positions of the planets are. So that's what secondary progressions are. Now, again, it sounds like just a symbolic language. We're going to add a day for each year of life. However, it now appears that it's more than just a symbolic language, that it's also a fractal reality. I made a video called How Astrology Works, a new theoretical framework. I have a link to it at the end of this video if you want to watch it. It's fairly long, as I said, it's an hour long. And in that video, I explain how the tropical zodiac has a striking similarity to new ideas in physics. It's just amazing how astrology and physics are growing closer and closer together. And also, I make some hints about this in that video, and I wanted to make it more explicit and clearer in this video, that the idea that a day equals a year also is becoming consistent with ideas in physics. So in that other video, I mentioned that there are 3 fundamental properties to subatomic particles: mass, charge, and spin. And the physicist Nassim Haramein and other physicists are suggesting that we live in a fractal reality. So this is very similar to astrological thinking, as above, so below, and that things are repeating from the galactic size to huge sizes to our size, and then down to the subatomic level. And this basic principle of spin seems to be operating at every level. So the Earth, as it revolves around the sun, that's a form of spin. There's a circular, well, actually elliptical motion as the Earth goes around the sun. It's a form of spin. And the Earth spinning on its axis, of course, is another form of spin. So the idea that these different levels of spin could be synchronized, could be part of one continuous spectrum that's reflecting each other, is not so far-fetched as it sounds. Now, in physics today, nobody, as far as I know, has suggested that those 2 levels of spin are intimately connected, but it's not so unreasonable to assume that they would, since there's increasing evidence that we do live in a fractal reality. So I just want to make it clear that we can think of it as part of a fractal reality, which is a growing idea among some physicists. And also, if you think about solar arc directions, they can be understood in terms of vibration, frequency, and this fractal reality. So it may be that these things are symbolic and they are vibrational and fractal at the same time. So to review what solar arc directions are, the formula, as I mentioned here in the second paragraph here, is that you take the progressed sun and you subtract the natal sun and you get a certain angular distance, and you add that to all the planets. So this really makes sense when you think of it, because if a day equals a year, then let's think about what a day is and a year is. They're both built on the relationship of the Earth and the sun. So when the Earth spins around and faces the sun again, we call that a day. So from wherever you live on the Earth, from the point where you are facing the sun at midday and you spin around and the Earth spins around and you're facing the sun again the next time, a day later, that's what we define as a day, how the Earth is oriented towards the sun. And also, of course, a year is when the Earth revolves around the sun. So it's this Earth-Sun relationship. The sun is 99% of the mass of our solar system. We're living on Earth. This very critical relationship, which is essential to life on Earth, obviously, our days and our years is how living things function in accordance with these basic cycles, that if this is, in fact, a real, live, fractal relationship, and that's not an unreasonable thing to suspect, then we're seeing that astrology is built into life. It is a language of the soul. It is a language of symbols, and it is a language of the rhythms of nature, and even the very essence of how our reality is constructed. I think it's a very exciting way to think of astrology. And the solar arc directions, here's why I think they work. Why they're so important is because that angular distance of the natal sun to the progressed sun is such a powerful angular distance. It's a way of measuring these two fundamental forms of spin. It's a way of measuring how they have grown or evolved or developed over time. That's a very, very, very powerful angular distance. And one of the ideas we use in vibrational astrology is that when two angular distances are the same, they're vibrating at the same frequency and they interact very strongly. So solar arc directions are a way of seeing very powerful vibrational effects in the progressed chart. So what we get here is that everything fits together. We're developing a theory where all these different ideas are now understood as one consistent way of understanding what's happening that works in the world of nature, in the world of particles, and in the world of symbolic thinking. It's all part of one consistent reality. So my concluding comments, I mentioned this before, transits, secondary progressions, and solar arc directions are the three most common predictive techniques used by modern Western astrologers. I think that's reasonably fair to say. And up until recently, only transits were understood to be completely based in the physical world. Now we see that all three predictive methods could very well be based in the physical world. Point number 2, the second paragraph here. We can think of the symbolic world and the physical world as different lenses into the same reality. So we don't have to think of the physical world as fundamental and the symbols evolving out of it. We don't have to think of the physical world as evolving out of a symbolic psychological world. You can do those things if you want to, but we can also just think of it as one reality, and we're getting different lenses into it. So the cycles of nature are related to the fundamental basis of nature in spin, one of the fundamental properties of the subatomic world. And this also creates our natural cycles and our symbolic awareness. All one reality manifested throughout, I think, is a reasonable way to think of it, and it's very consistent, I think, with the intuition a lot of us have about astrology. Last thing I want to say is obviously astrology is controversial. People believe in it, they don't believe in it. The people who, quote, believe in it and use it have different ideas about what it is. So any discussion of what the nature of astrology is, what the nature of specific techniques is going to be controversial. So regardless of how you view it, I think it's good to consider different possibilities, to put them out on the table and to think about different ways that things could possibly actually really be. And that's what I've tried to do here. I think you can tell that my view is that I think, as I just said, astrology operates at all these levels simultaneously. At least large parts of astrology do, and at least secondary progressions, solar arc directions, and transits, these three main predictive methods used in the modern Western astrology, I think are simultaneously fractal, vibrational, and symbolic all at the same time. And that's why these things work. Okay, my friends, I hope you found that interesting. God bless. Namaste.